battle and the jabs will be all important on Saturday night, and you can see here with the Cobra, Kubrat Pulev, he very much is like a Cobra. He sways in front of his opponents, and then he will change his jab to body and to head. So you'll see in some of these clips he'll jab the body, then he'll jab the head. His jabs tend to be at a 45-degree angle. He edges towards his left, he sways to the side, and he shoots it up through the guard, piercing the defense of his opponents. You see how he circles the backhand of the opponent, he sways, and then he'll use that jab, and then he'll be able to get his right hand into play as fights go on. And he'll shoot that over. You'll see that in some of the clips, but he's very good at being economical, not doing too much, but enough to make you hesitant of whether he's going to jab or where he's going to jab. So you're never sure whether he's going to go to the body or whether he's going to go to the head. Sometimes he'll double that jab up, and you'll see here against Hughie Fury he's even covering distance with the jab, being very aggressive. But you'll see against Vladimir a lot of posturing, a lot of twitching, but then he'll jab to the body as well. Now with Joshua, now the people will say, well, why are you using the clip of Vladimir Klitschko? Because he's taller than Pulev, but stylistically you'll see there's similarities in how they operate with their lead hand, and just in general the psychology of what they're doing. You see here Klitschko putting a lot of mental pressure on Joshua. Joshua would offset that by touching the lead glove with his left hand and then shooting double jabs to the chest to try and offset Vladimir's advances. When Joshua does jab, he jabs differently to Pulev in a way that he will do it. He will edge towards his left, like Pulev, but he jabs towards the backhand. So you can see on Saturday night that both men will be moving towards their opponent's backhand in order to get their jab into position. Joshua will jab to the body at times, but when he does jab, you'll notice that he actually more or less jabs towards the backhand of his opponent. So it comes at a sort of angle. It never really turns the fist over, but he jabs towards the backhand, as I say, looking to get those power shots in from the backhand and then from the hooks and uppercuts. It'll be very interesting to see how he will defend against Pulev's jab, simply because Anthony, if he's not moving his feet, he only parries, and we'll talk about that, the defensive stuff later on, but ultimately, as you see there, he's parrying, but the head doesn't move. Now Pulev's very good at staying in position to punch and then being able to stop opponents coming back in on him with his arms and by bouncing back out to range. You'll see here it's Parker using a lot of twitching and feinting. He was never as close as what I expect Pulev to be. I expect Pulev to get closer. I was expecting to get inches lead foot in and do a lot of swaying and make it a lot of mental pressure on Joshua. And it's whether Joshua will be centre ring on Saturday night or whether he will elect to move or do a bit of both. I agree with Ben Davison. That is one of the most intriguing things. How is he going to approach this fight on Saturday night? But just look at the way that Vladimir using that lead glove, and you can see there's similarities to what Pulev will do on Saturday night, although the footwork of Vladimir is a lot more fleet-footed and fluid than Pulev, who, for all intents and purposes, he's economical, shall we say, very economical in what he does, doesn't like to waste a lot of energy. You can see here Vladimir putting a lot of mental pressure on Joshua, and that's why Joshua retired in that fight very quickly. Not only the physical stuff, but also the mental. So I noticed that both men against Klitschko used a little paw game, which is with the lead glove going across their body towards Klitschko's lead glove. So both orthodox fighters touching the lead glove of their opponent Klitschko in order to fill his range and just try and offset him from jabbing. But you'll see here what Klitschko does against Joshua. He's able to sweep it out with a hook, just a little throwaway hook just to move it out of the way so he can create that space for the right hand to come in behind it. But you can see Joshua's trying to fill for the range, and he'll do this actually against Andy Ruiz in the second fight as well, and I've put that clip in here for people to see that it's not something that Joshua's just done, he has done it before. So you'll notice here, every time Tony Weeks steps in and separates Klitschko and Pulev, Klitschko would land big. Pulev would fall asleep at range. Klitschko would propel himself by getting up on his toes and then cover that distance and come in with either left hooks or right hands. Pulev clearly was switching off at these moments, taking these opportunities to rest physically and mentally, and Klitschko was using those moments of separation to be able to cover the distance and beat the barriers of Pulev's arms and able to get past those arms in order to get his big shots off. Now you'll see with his right glove, Pulev feels for the range, he feels for the with the left hand, but with the right hand he tries to parry. And what Klitschko's looked to do there is that he puts his left hand in a position where he draws Pulev's right glove and then comes around the inside of the glove with his left hook, and that is an opening that's there against Pulev because of how he is. You'll see here how he fights. He puts his right glove, so Klitschko drops that left hand low, dips, and then comes with the left hook on the inside of the glove. One area I feel Anthony Joshua can have success on Saturday night is on the inside. Pulev at times will look to engage in the clinch. Often he can make fights quite messy when he clinches, especially against Klitschko. I found that he would be, and even against Ustinov, he will leave his left glove out and look to take their right hand and then wrap it underneath his arm and engage in that overhook position. The problem is he's in no position to defend himself if that right hand goes on the inside of the left glove, or for instance an uppercut. And this is where Joshua is very good, because he's able to change tempo on the inside. He changes the intensity, as you see against Ruiz and against Vladimir Klitschko. He's able to step on the inside, use the Lennox Lewis special, grabbing the back of the head and using the right uppercut left hook. And you'll see against Klitschko, he'll do it again here, back of the head and the right uppercut. He's very good at doing that, and that change of intensity could spark something for him on the night, especially if Pulev is not willing to work and loses concentration. Joshua can do this by pushing his hips back, giving him enough leverage to land these shots. So the lead foot of Pulev is where he puts his pressure on, so he inches into position, and from there, as he edges in, he keeps his upper body neutral, but the lead hand and lead foot are doing all the pressure. They're making the opponent think, and then little steps and little shifts across just to cut the ring down on the opponent, and keeps that psychological pressure on the opponent, all whilst not actually doing a great deal in terms of volume of punches. And what he does defensively with his feet is, if the opponent attacks, he'll just bounce back out. It's called a pendulum. So he'll pendulum back out to range, and if you do it again, he'll pendulum again. It's all very straight line, so if someone attacks him on the second and third phase, he then just puts his arms up or covers up full guard. But when we look at Joshua, we look at a fighter that is often very aggressive, but in the Ruiz second fight, the rematch, he used a lot of movement. But I think people have forgotten that Joshua, throughout the fight against Vladimir Klitschko, had lost control of the centre ring and was being forced to use lateral movement. Joshua has been up on his toes before and has moved. The difference is, in that fight against Ruiz, he showed a patience and a discipline and an ability to move both ways, and he looked more fluid doing it. However, we have to temper that with the fact that Andy Ruiz was 20 stone, the rumours of him not training, and the fact that he never really pushed the tempo and really tried to let his hands go from any distance. It was just a very slow paced fight. Against Pulev, it will be very interesting to see if he can apply that pressure with the front foot and start to cut the ring down on Joshua if he indeed fights like this, because ultimately Joshua's footwork was still a little erratic. There would be times where he'd be moving across the line and back across and would be crossing his feet over, and against someone with a consistent jab and someone that's able to apply the pressure, that can be a problem, because it'll leave him out of position offensively, but also defensively he'll be in a precarious position. There were times where he dropped off and he took away the range away from Ruiz, but quite often it's near the ropes. If someone's able to apply that pressure on him and cut the ring down on him against those ropes, that could be a bit of a worry as the fight moves on. Here's some footage of Joshua in those middle rounds starting to feel the pace, as Ruiz, who didn't really put him under a sustained amount of pressure throughout the fight, but still Joshua was starting feeling the lactic acid in his arms trying to shake him out, feeling tired, trying to engage in clinches, just showing some naivety. And against someone who's able to put a little bit more sustained pressure on him, if he boxes like this, these could be concerning periods if he starts to do this sort of thing against someone who's a little bit more sharper than what Ruiz was on the night. So one of the defensive techniques that Pulev will use is to bounce back in a straight line, and sometimes he'll use 2 bounces in a straight line and he'll go against the ropes. You'll notice also that he'll pull a full guard and leave his body exposed, leaves it massively exposed, and he puts his hands around his head and also leaves a seam open for the uppercut. Now with Joshua, he'll use a lot of parrying with the jab, and then he'll bounce back as well and shift back from jabs, as you'll see here. It's at range that Pulev likes to use barriers as defence. He likes to use his arms to stop fighters coming in and keep that distance and that space. But the problem is, someone like Klitschko was able to use his momentum by getting up on his toes, drawing the right glove into a position where he could then land his left hook and his right hand. He was baiting him with his lead hand, and then up on his toes was getting that momentum in order to then get past the barriers and then land big shots on Pulev. And it's something that athletic fighters will be able to do because of the way Pulev is. He's flat-footed, so he's not able to get out of the way of these shots because he's in position. Once you cover that distance, he's in position to be hit. And you'll see here against Bogdan Dinu how he was caught with the right hand, and he wears rival gloves. That's just a note. That's what Joshua sometimes wears as well, and you see how much damage they cause to that eye. Joshua has a tendency to be hurt with the left hook. White and Klitschko landed their left hooks on the inside of his guard, on the inside of his right glove, caught him on the chin, whereas Ruiz caught him high on the temple. He doesn't have his hands in a particularly great place because he's square of the upper body, and because his gloves are down by his chin, he leaves his temple exposed. And also you'll see here, as he's caught by the right hand, it's a tendency he can be caught by straight shots that are set up after some patient feints, because he doesn't really move his head offline. Put it this way, there was still some worrying moments in the Ruiz fight in the rematch where he left himself and his hands in dodgy positions. One little subtle thing that he does do well, and has done for quite some time, even pre-Ruiz, is how he uses the barrier, how he uses his lead hand as a barrier to stop the opponent coming in. You see there, just putting it out, a little bit of head control and head placement, which is something he's relatively good at. Blueprint to victory on Saturday night for Anthony Joshua would be first and foremost to fight the fight centre ring. Don't allow dominance from Pulev. Don't allow him to apply that mental pressure that he's looking to apply on Saturday night. Keep the fight centre ring, move clockwise. You'll see how Pulev has to constantly keep lifting his leg up against Vladimir as Vladimir edges to his left. You'll see that Pulev has to keep adjusting his position. From there, he's moving away from that jabbing hand, so that takes the jab away from Pulev, and then you use your own jab. A great way to take away the jab from another fighter is to jab yourself. Jab to the body, little half feints, keep Pulev off balance. By doing that, you see these little half feints, you're keeping him off balance, then you can jab to his chest and you can force him off balance and push him out of centre ring, and then ultimately set him up for these shots from range, from distance, which Joshua is very good at. He's able to cover distance, he has the speed, the reach, the athleticism to do this. As long as he's patient in the fight, this will be a key to victory. And the blueprint to victory on Saturday night for Pulev ultimately is to apply mental pressure early, edging his lead foot into position, as you can see here, forcing Joshua to punch as he did there with Klitschko. He forced Klitschko to lead, and then it's timing. Timing beats speed. If you can force Joshua into mistakes by putting that mental pressure on him and pushing him against the ropes, see as you've got here against Fury, and using those little feints, that will help him to be able to set up his punches. From there, because of the way Joshua uses his defense, you can pull his gloves. Because he looks to parry, you can pull his guard apart and expose those gaps in his defense. And to keep himself safe against Joshua, he has to be able to get himself back out to range, so his back foot has to be quicker. in order to keep himself safe. For my take on the fight, despite all the analysis, it's still a difficult fight to predict, because ultimately you're looking at one fighter who is nearly 40 years of age. He hasn't fought at a high level for a while, and his toughest fight, he struggled. You know, he had a kamikaze style against Klitschko and left himself exposed, but albeit he showed a lot of resilience, took some heavy shots and went to war with Klitschko, and he landed some good stuff himself, and he was effective to a certain extent in that fight. But there was little lulls, and that's the difference between good fighters and top fighters. Now, Joshua isn't Klitschko, and Joshua has his own fragilities, and the difference is his fragilities are still there, because he hasn't developed a style as of yet that's going to be effective like Klitschko's, because Klitschko built it upon patience and upon landing and then smothering the opponent's work. Joshua still, you could see, had the naivety in him against Ruiz. Is Pulev going to be able to apply that pressure? Well, Joe Goosen was meant to be training him for this fight before the pandemic, so we can tell that Pulev's attitude is to be ultra aggressive, because that's what Joe is. He's an ultra attacking coach, so we know his mindset is to go and he's going to try and put the pressure on, and he's going to have a shootout with Joshua. But can Joshua afford to be in shootouts? Because ultimately he still is fragile, and that's the thing we've got to look at. Andy Ruiz is a totally different kettle of fish to Kubrat Pulev. Pulev is much more of a straight shooter, European style, a lot of aggressive feints, a lot more patience, but he's still trying to create openings with that lead hand, jab into the body, jab into the head, sweeping your guard away to open up things. He's active without doing a lot, whereas Andy Ruiz is very, very patient and waits for those moments. And that's the difference. That was the difference between the first fight and the second fight. The first fight, the opportunities came to him. The second fight, they never came to him. Joshua never engaged him, and that's how he nullified him, because Ruiz was too patient and too much waiting on one moment for him to come in so he could land again to the head with the counters, with the hooks. As I say, Pulev's a straight shooter, but those straight shots can cause Joshua problems. As much as we've seen him hit with hooks, straight shots can cause him problems. We know that he can be hurt to the body too. Dillian White showed that, and Pulev is very good at shooting straight shots down to the solar plex, and that can slow Joshua down as this fight goes on. So Joshua's got to be aware of that. And then you have to look at the element of, well, Pulev, as he edges forward, he leaves himself open to shots because of his wide guard and his wide stance, and because he's not quick on the back foot to get out, he can be caught. It's about how Joshua negates that, because see, Joshua has to be aware that if he does do what Klitschko does and fires in from range, he's still got to set it up. He's still got to keep himself disciplined, and that's what it's about on Saturday night. Is he going to have the same discipline as he did against Ruiz, against Pulev? Because Pulev is going to put a different type of pressure on him, and that is what's so intriguing about this fight. For me, predictions, it's very, very difficult. You sort of think to yourself, well, you should really be able to back Joshua winning this fight via possibly a late stoppage, mid to late stoppage, or on points, possibly needing to break down Pulev, because Pulev is a tough man. I saw, the amount of shots he took against Klitschko, he showed a lot of toughness, but he can be hurt and he can be taken, and it wouldn't surprise me if Joshua stops him or wins it on points. But I then look and think, them fragilities are still there. And if anyone said to me, look, I want to bet on Pulev, I wouldn't say, look, I'm not a betting man, but it wouldn't surprise me, because ultimately Joshua still has those vulnerabilities, and until he shows a style, a consistent style that he's found to be able to nullify opponents landing on him, he's always going to have those worries. But nonetheless, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you enjoy the content, please like, share and subscribe, and definitely comment below your predictions on the fight. And as I say, look, nothing would surprise me in this fight. For all intents and purposes, you would expect Joshua to win this one, but there's still some